My parents forged medical records to force me into surrogacy for my sister. I refused. They called me selfish and pressured my family to push me. I never imagined that I would be writing this post, but following last week's events, I need a different viewpoint. My parents abruptly contacted me after 13 years of little communication, stating that they needed to talk about something significant. Greg 43M, my husband, was concerned that something odd might be happening, but neither of us could have foreseen what would happen. Emily 44F, my older sister, has always been the family's golden child. As a child, it was obvious that she was everything my parents could have ever hoped for: intelligent, athletic, attractive, and seemingly flawless. She was frequently praised by them, who referred to her as their perfect princess or golden apple. 2 years after Emily's birth, I was an unexpected surprise. In my parents' perspective, being unexpected wasn't my only sign. I was born prematurely and had a severe cardiac issue that required numerous operations and ongoing care during my early years. Even though my grandparents paid for the majority of the medical bills that insurance did not cover, my parents never let me forget how much of a financial burden I was. We could have taken that vacation if we didn't have all these medical bills. Or Emily's college fund would be bigger if we didn't have to deal with your hospital stays, are examples of the passive-aggressive remarks they would make. Their treatment of us was a sharp and terrible contrast. My accomplishments were hardly recognized, but Emily's little victories were honored with parties and gifts. In high school, I recall winning a writing contest at the state level. Emily had a regular soccer practice that day, so my parents were unable to attend the awards ceremony. The everyday small things that truly brought home to me how different we were from them weren't simply the significant events either. Emily was well aware of her status as the golden child and made the most of it. Knowing that our parents would never support me, she would frequently bully me. When I was 12, I was shoved down the stairs by her after I unintentionally touched her science project. For weeks, I had a huge bruise on my back. My mother's reaction: "You should be more careful around Emily's things." That was it. Just another reminder that I was less valuable than her possessions, with no care for my hurt or retribution for Emily. My only way out was to go to school, but even that was difficult. I struggled to stay up because I missed a lot of classes due to my health problems. While I was fighting to maintain mediocre grades in between medical stays, Emily was achieving straight A's and dominating in sports. The analogies persisted. Why aren't you more like Emily? Emily never struggles with her assignments. Emily doesn't cause us this much anxiety. I had figured out how to blend in as much as possible by the time I got to high school. That was simpler. Emily already had a ton of friends, was headed to a prominent institution, and was leading the ideal life my parents had always desired for their kids. In the meantime, all I was doing was surviving each day without feeling like a total failure. Going to college was the true turning point in my life. In order to move as far away from home as possible, I pleaded with my grandparents. They were the only ones who ever truly stood by me, and they understood, having seen the dynamic unfold for years. I selected a university that was several states away, and they assisted me with tuition and other costs. I met Greg when I was a college student. He was patient, compassionate, and truly interested in me as a person rather than as a weaker sibling, which set him apart from everyone else I had ever met. I felt appreciated and acknowledged for who I was for the first time in my life. After graduation, we were married, and I believed that I could finally be able to achieve the family life I had always desired. Emily and my parents hardly noticed my wedding. They didn't send a card. They didn't come. I wasn't shocked, but it stung. I was embraced by Greg's family, and his mother even assisted me in choosing my wedding gown, something I had always dreamed of doing with my own mother. We made the decision to try for a child a few years into our marriage. Because of my cardiac condition, my doctors told me that getting pregnant would be quite dangerous, but we still wanted to try. The pregnancy was really challenging. Despite my many hospital stays and a near-death experience during delivery, I barely survived, but our son was born healthy. The physicians were very clear. I may die from another pregnancy. It was just too much for my heart to bear again. With our small family, Greg and I were happy, away from my poisonous family. We had each other, our lovely boy, and a tranquil existence. My only communication with Emily and my parents was through sporadic phone calls and holiday cards. The separation was restorative. Then came last week. My parents contacted me, stating that they had an important conversation to have. I agreed to see them at their home, against my better judgment. Greg accompanied me to provide assistance. They handed me an envelope and seated us down in their living room, the same space where they had repeatedly mocked and disregarded me during my early years. There was a letter inside, but it was a surrogacy agreement, not just any letter. Emily has been having infertility issues, so they wanted me to be her surrogate. They had already conferred with physicians and attorneys, prepared all the necessary documentation, and were presenting it to me as though it were final, as though I had no say in the matter. I was taken aback. They were aware of my cardiac condition. They were aware that I had almost passed away when giving birth to my own baby. They were aware that I could die from another pregnancy. However, they didn't care about all of it. They just cared about providing Emily with what she desired. My mother started crying as I attempted to explain that I was physically incapable of doing it, and that physicians had specifically advised against getting pregnant again. She cried, "How can you be so selfish? Emily has always wanted to be a mother. This is her only chance." My father added that after everything the family had done for me, I owed them something. What had they done for me? What specifically had they done to make me feel unworthy for the rest of my life? My grandparents paid the medical costs they loved to hang over my head. Greg and his family provided me with the emotional support I required. My parents' sole constant behavior was to tell me that I would never be good enough to be Emily. With my mother's charge of selfishness still echoing in my ears, I sobbed as I left their home. Greg was incensed not only at their request, but also at the way they totally disregarded the possibility that I might die. He advises me to stop communicating with them, as they have shown beyond a reasonable doubt that they are indifferent to my welfare. I know in my heart that he is correct. This suggestion is cruel in addition to being unkind. As usual, they want me to sacrifice my life and maybe leave my son motherless in order to give Emily what she wants. However, I also feel guilty about it. Perhaps I'm being self-centered. Perhaps I do owe them. Perhaps this is my opportunity to finally show them how valuable I am. Even though I am aware that these thoughts are harmful, they continue to race through my mind. Since that day, I have not returned any of their calls or messages. Emily has begun contacting me as well, with false statements like, "Family helps family," and "I would do this for you if the situation were reversed." Should it be a little bit out of her way, she wouldn't even offer to drive me to school. My son is on my mind all the time. If something were to happen to me while I was pregnant, he would be the one who would suffer the most. He needs his mother and is innocent in all of this family drama. How can they expect me to risk leaving my child an orphan in order to satisfy Emily's demands? Am I being self-centered? I've been told throughout my life that I'm bad for prioritizing my own needs. However, this is now about my son, my husband, and my life, not just about me. But I'm being tormented by guilt. I need a different viewpoint. Is it incorrect of me to decline to serve as my sister's surrogate? Should I put myself in danger to fulfill her desires? How can I handle the manipulation and guilt? Update 1. A week has passed since my last post, and things have gotten far worse than I anticipated. My family's calls and messages haven't stopped vibrating on my phone. Emily has been sending texts that manipulate emotions nonstop. This is my final opportunity to have my own child, and I've always wanted to be a mother. Remember how I always looked out for you when we were kids? She even dared to ask that. One almost made me laugh. She must remember our early years quite differently than I do. She sent a particularly nasty email yesterday, saying, "Mom was right about you. You always thought about yourself. I suppose that almost dying while pregnant is merely a pretext for not assisting me. It was a powerful blow. Instead of treating my near-death experience a valid medical issue, they are exploiting it as proof of my selfishness. Even worse are my parents. I'm ruining Emily's sole chance at happiness. Mom has been telling any relative who will listen over the phone. She is portraying me as this cold-blooded monster who refuses to assist her dying sister. However, Emily is not dying. She is simply unable to conceive naturally. They're behaving as though Emily's wish to have a biological kid is more significant than my actual risk of dying. This morning, Dad sent me a message that truly went too far. You've always been a letdown, but this is a new low. This is your way of repaying us for giving you life by denying your sister the experience of being a mother. I wanted to reply that they didn't really give me life. My grandparents were the ones who covered the cost of the medical treatment that kept me alive, and they almost lost it due to carelessness several times when I was a toddler. Greg is enraged. I dissuaded him from driving to their house and confronting them. Even though I would have loved to watch him reprimand them, I informed him they're not worth it. Rather, we engaged in a lengthy discussion about our future. Greg reminded me, "This isn't just about you anymore. It has to do with our son. He might lose his mother as a result of what they're requesting. Nobody has the authority to force you to take that risk." Of course, he is correct. I feel no remorse for turning Emily down. When I see our son, he needs his mom to be well and living. We have made the decision to act decisively. Let's start by blocking all of their numbers, including Emily's, Mom's, Dad's, and even the flying monkeys they called after me. My grandparents are the lone exception, and they have always been accepting and encouraging. Second, we're investigating legal safeguards. Greg fears they may try something desperate because of their antagonistic behavior. Next week, we're meeting with a lawyer to go over our choices. I will always be perplexed by their claim to be family and their utter disregard for my life. However, I'm over my guilt. I will no longer allow them to control me. A mother who would put her life in danger to appease individuals who have never truly shown her love is not worthy of my son. Thank you to everyone who left a remark on my previous post. You made it clear to me that I'm being a responsible mother and defending my family, not being selfish. Standing up to those who ought to have protected you in the first place is sometimes necessary. I'll provide another update if something noteworthy occurs, but hopefully this will be the last one with my true family, my spouse and son, who genuinely appreciate my existence. I'm prepared to go on ... update 2. I've blocked everyone for 2 weeks now. I assumed that was the last of it, but my mother managed to get in touch with me using a temporary number. Just the two of us, not Greg. Need to talk. I consented to meet at a nearby cafe, even though every instinct told me not to attend for obvious reasons. I picked a public spot, and Greg was waiting in his car nearby in case something happened. She began talking about Emily's melancholy and how she's dying of the anguish of not being able to have children. As soon as I sat down, in what was obviously a prepared speech, "No, how are you?" No recognition of their prior actions, just a direct focus on Emily's misery. My mother pushed a business card across the table and said, "The doctors say this is her last chance. According to one fertility expert, you two are a fantastic fit. They are able to keep a careful eye on your cardiac health." She dismissed it as if it were a minor annoyance when I brought up the fact that my own doctors, who have been aware of my medical history for years, have expressly prohibited me from getting pregnant again. Doctors are constantly too cautious. According to Emily's specialist, the risks are controllable. When Mom began discussing family legacy and how Emily should be given more genetic inheritance than I did, the discussion took an even more sinister turn. She did say that after all I've heard the same arguments about my being a flawed child my entire life. She replied, "I should have known you'd be difficult about this." As I got up to go, she said, "Emily has always made you envious. This is your opportunity to at last take action for the family." I felt oddly at ease as I walked out of the cafe. I finally saw my mother clearly for the first time, not as a parent who didn't love me enough, but rather as someone who never considered me a person, only a tool to be used for Emily's gain. Greg inquired about how things went on the way home. I informed him of my mother's remarks about family legacy and her rejection of my health concerns. After a period of silence, he said, "You know what? They're not worthy of you." They have never done so. He is correct. They are unworthy of me, my forgiveness, or another opportunity to harm me. I've given my mother one last message. I won't put myself in danger or leave my child an orphan because of Emily's wishes. We will not be talking about it again. Don't get in touch with me again. Tomorrow, I'm going to change my number. Sometimes quitting the game completely is the only way to win. Update 3. My father began sending increasingly threatening messages from various phones a week after the cafe incident involving my mother. I was particularly drawn to the most recent one. "Your mother is devastated. Emily is in pieces. You have given us no other option. Even if we didn't want to do this, there are repercussions for actions." My grandmother's voice was tremulous when she called. "I heard your parents conversing with an attorney. They're looking for legal means to compel you to do this. They may use laws pertaining to family obligations and medical rights, although they made reference to court orders and medical evaluations. I'm not entirely sure what they have planned. Evidently, they have persuaded themselves that they may be able to contest my own doctor's opinion because Emily's fertility specialist claims the risks are tolerable. They're even considering attempting to demonstrate that my reluctance isn't due to valid medical concerns, but rather to a logical family resentment. Additionally, my grandmother disclosed that Emily's 46-year-old husband is genuinely opposed to their plan. He believes that risking someone's life for this is crazy, but Emily and my parents have essentially cut him off from the conversation. That family, at least, has one sensible member. I called my doctor's office right away and asked them to implement additional security measures to lock down my medical records. I then got in touch with 3 different family law businesses, the first to express sympathy, but stated that they would have to look into this peculiar circumstance, but the third one was just what we needed. When the lawyer heard the whole scenario, she became enraged. They cannot legally compel you to serve as a surrogate. It would be considered reproductive coercion and would not be tolerated by any court. However, we must take the initiative. She is assisting us with creating cease and desist letters and preparing the necessary papers for a restraining order. Additionally, we are recording every message, phone, and contact attempt. According to the attorney, if we require legal protection in the future, we must establish a distinct pattern of harassment. The majority of our legal expenditures are covered by Greg's company's excellent legal insurance plan. Even if it didn't, I would sell my car if I had to, he stated last night. Your safety is worth everything we have. The most bizarre aspect of it all is that they still act as though they are the victims and that I'm the one who is acting irrationally, as if compelling someone to put their life in danger is some sort of admirable sacrifice. My mother reportedly informed my grandma that sometimes love means making difficult choices for the family. I'm exhausted, so exhausted, but I'm no longer scared. Let them play their games and try their legal threats. Truth, the law, and real medical proof are all on my side. Above all, I am supported by individuals who sincerely care about my life and welfare. Update 4. The legal threats began 2 weeks ago, and now my whole extended family involved in this nightmare. During their recent family get-together, which I was obviously not invited to, my aunt from Texas called yesterday and sobbed about having to see Emily endure yet another unsuccessful IVF effort. The most unsettling aspect, the story has been entirely altered by my parents. My cousins claim that they're telling everyone that I'm thus using my heart ailment as an excuse because it has significantly improved. They've even implied that I'm declining because I want to see Emily suffer, because I'm envious of her success. The cryptic Facebook postings that my mother's sisters have begun sharing about selfish family members and the value of sacrifice for family were what truly caught me off surprise. Everyone in the family is aware of who they are referring to, even though they aren't specifically addressing me. I've received messages from some distant relatives I haven't seen since I was a child, expressing their disappointment with my decisions. My cousin Sarah, 39F, is the one bright spot in all of this. She personally contacted me to express her anger with everyone's actions. She wrote, "I recall how they treated you as a child. They're being crazy. Don't let them guilt you into this. At the next family get-together." She even volunteered to talk about her personal encounters with my parents' partiality. These flying monkeys are unaware that last night, Emily's husband spoke with Greg in secret. He fears that, because of all this harassment, Emily and my parents will end up in legal hot water. He has attempted to reason with them, but they aren't listening to anyone because they are so focused on achieving their goals. I've already made up my mind. I wrote a mass email to my entire extended family last night that had only the medical facts about my heart problem, along with a statement from my cardiologist on the risks of getting pregnant again, without any drama or accusations. I concluded it by saying that my lawyer would handle any further harassment and that I would no longer discuss surrogacy. Then, with the exception of my grandparents and cousin Sarah, I blocked every member of my family. Greg assisted me in creating new social media profiles for close friends only, using a different identity. It's strangely freeing, but it seems like entering witness protection. Yesterday, my youngster questioned me about why we no longer see Grandma and Grandpa. I told him that sometimes we have to avoid individuals who don't respect our limits, even if they are family, even if it breaks my heart. After giving it some consideration, he remarked, "Like when Tommy at school doesn't stop when I say no. Children are more capable of understanding than we realize." I've learned from this whole experience that my true family ain't always the folks with whom I share DNA. It's the people who love me without conditions, who respect my right to life, and who cherish my presence above and beyond what I can do for others. Update 5. I sent out a bulk email to the extended family a month ago. The result was different from what I had dreaded, yet it was precisely what you would expect. Genuine peace is something I've never experienced before. Thanks to my new phone number and secret social media profile, through my grandma, I heard what is likely to be my mother's final message to me. "You've let this family down for the last time. You put your self-interest ahead of Emily's happiness. You shouldn't anticipate being welcomed back." Oddly, I felt a tremendous sense of comfort instead of pain as I read those words. What I've understood all along, that my sole worth was what I could do for Emily, was now expressed aloud. This morning, my lawyer called to let me know that Emily was contacted by her fertility clinic. They wanted to make it clear that they had never authorized surrogacy agreements involving a person with my medical background. It seems that neither Emily nor my parents had ever brought up my cardiac ailment. This only serves to highlight their lack of concern for my well-being. The most unexpected result: no more worrying about family get-togethers, dread when my phone rings, or persistent feelings of inadequacy. I'm sleeping better than I have in years, Greg also noticed, saying I'm laughing more freely and smiling more in this brand new, drama-free setting. Our youngster is flourishing. We began Sunday board game nights as a new family tradition. Last weekend, I had a profound realization as I sat there and watched him laugh with Greg. This is how family should feel: secure, affectionate, and welcoming. Sometimes my grandmother comes to visit, but she always makes sure my folks are unaware. Last time, she brought old pictures of me as a baby that I had never seen before. As I looked at them, I saw a contented little girl who had no idea that she would spend decades attempting to win affection that ought to have been given without conditions. I finally provided the protection that little child needed from those who never valued her. She deserved better. I want to express my gratitude to everyone on Reddit who helped me along the way. Your remarks made it clear to me that defending myself was a matter of survival rather than selfishness. You showed me that a true family doesn't require you to sacrifice yourself for them. If you're wondering whether it's wrong to shield oneself from a toxic family, the answer is no. Your limits are legitimate, your health is important, and your life has worth. Walking away from folks who don't love you enough can sometimes be the bravest thing you can do. Since there is really nothing else to say, I will no longer be updating the story. I've closed the chapter on my dysfunctional family with the family I've chosen, the ones who genuinely want me to live, to read them. It's time to concentrate on writing fresh, healthier chapters. But hold on, shortly after I posted this update, two surprising events occurred. First, my lawyer received a legal letter from Emily's fertility clinic. As it turns out, my parents tried to conceal my heart ailment by falsifying my medical records. A report regarding this unlawful effort at medical fraud is already being filed by the clinic. The second was that Emily's husband had had enough. In the family group chat, he revealed how my parents and Emily had conspired to conceal my illness from the doctors. He disclosed that Emily was aware of my near-death experience while I was pregnant, but she had purposely kept it a secret from everyone. The response from the extended family was prompt. Suddenly, the aunts and cousins who had been disparaging me stopped talking. My Texas aunt apologized over the phone, claiming she was unaware of the effort at medical fraud. Since then, a number of family members have stopped communicating with my parents and Emily, describing their behavior as completely illegal. Last week, Emily's husband filed for divorce because he couldn't stand being married to someone who would commit fraud and endanger her sister's life. My parents' flawless story about their precious child was ultimately shattered by this. Emily and my parents have been banned from all of the medical facilities that are associated with the reproductive clinic. According to my attorney, they might be subject to severe legal repercussions for their effort at medical fraud. Seeing their flawless facade fall apart after their own deeds were exposed feels like poetic justice. Even though I never sought retribution, all I wanted was to be left alone. You are truly set free by the truth. For those who want an update on the repercussions, let me say that sometimes people who spend their entire life controlling other people end up controlling themselves. Emily and my parents did this to themselves. I'm simply living my best life with folks who genuinely appreciate me, while keeping a safe distance. Reddit. Thank you. Your assistance has been amazing along our journey. When I initially wrote about the demand for surrogacy, I was overcome with self-doubt and remorse. Your remarks gave me strength and demonstrated to me that true family is about more than just blood. It's about love and respect. This community demonstrated that strangers can occasionally offer greater support than one's parents. I will always be appreciative of the way you gave me freedom and a voice. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. My parents chose my brother over me, hid my inheritance, and now seek my help after his fraudulent betrayal. My parents supported my brother after he slapped me during my son's birthday celebration when he attempted to take their house, which was actually mine. Years later, they pleaded for assistance. Eric, my younger brother, is 28 million and I am 35 million. Favoritism was so blatant in our home while I was growing up that it was painful. My parents behaved as though Eric was a priceless treasure that had to be safeguarded at all costs from the moment of his birth. While I was just there, I still recall my 10th birthday celebration being canceled due to Eric's cold. They couldn't risk him feeling excluded from the festivities because he only had a cold, not even a fever. As we aged, things only got worse. I was the debate team captain, a straight A student, and even received a partial scholarship for my SAT results. My parents, however, hardly noticed. They were too preoccupied in complimenting Eric on passing his classes with C grades. The same thing happened at every parent-teacher conference. I earned a degree in computer science, worked several jobs to pay for education, and got a fantastic position at a software business. I met my wife, Darla 33F. There, she is intelligent, kind, and in contrast to my family, she genuinely acknowledges my accomplishments. James is our 1-year-old kid, and we were married 5 years ago. Eric, however, never left the house. After 1 semester, he left community college because it was too stressful and returned home. At the age of 28, he continues to live with our parents and works part-time at a nearby video game store. He spends much of his time playing video games. This is entirely made possible by my parents. They cover all of his expenses, including his meals, bills, auto insurance, and game subscriptions. My mother literally broke down in tears when I suggested that Eric might want to look for a full-time job, saying that I was being too harsh on her sensitive little boy. We threw James's first birthday celebration at my parents' place last month. They insisted, even though I didn't want to. Mom remarked that being a part of his nephew's special day would mean a lot to Eric. In an attempt to maintain harmony, I accepted, even though I should have known better. The celebration got off to a decent start. We had streamers and balloons to adorn the garden. James was enjoying himself greatly in the company of his loved ones. Up until lunchtime, everything was going smoothly. I was searching the crowd for Darla after stuffing my plate full of food. At that moment, it occurred to me. Eric was standing just behind me. As I turned around and unintentionally ran into him, his new limited edition gaming t-shirt got some of my food, which was pasta with marinara sauce on it. Since I understood that gaming gear can be pricey, I instantly apologized and offered to buy him a new shirt or even pay for dry cleaning. Eric flipped out. Rather than accept my apology, he began to yell that I always ruin everything for him. As his face flushed, he cited instances from our early years when he claimed that I intentionally attempted to harm him, such as when I broke his game console by tripping over its wire. I was 12. He was 5. Or when I received the last piece of pizza at his 10th birthday celebration. I hadn't eaten all day because I was helping set up his party. The room fell silent. We had everyone's attention. Eric gave me a forceful slap across the face before I could fight myself. The room was silent as the sound reverberated. My cheek ached, but the next thing that transpired hurt even more. My mother hurried over to fuss over Eric, not to see how I was doing. She began to inquire about his well-being and whether he required ice for his hand. He slapped me, as though I had done something wrong. My dad simply stood there with his arms crossed and gave me a disapproving look. I surveyed the space. James, who had begun to weep from the chaos, was being held by my wife, who was standing there in shock. While some people glanced away awkwardly, others murmured to each other. I stood there with a red mark on my cheek, and there was Eric being comforted by our mother. I asked my parents whether they truly approved of their son being beaten at his own child's birthday celebration. When I had finally found my voice, my mother's reaction, "You're older. You should know better. Look what you did to his new shirt. You know how much he loves his gaming merchandise. He saved up for weeks to buy that." I lost it at that point. Years of repressed annoyance were released. I told them that throughout his life, they had allowed Eric to act in this way. They had never reprimanded him, encouraged him to improve, or held him responsible for anything. I brought up the fact that at 28, he was still living at home and playing video games when I had put a lot of effort into building my life since I was 18. I explained that Eric had a gaming tournament that day, thus they had missed my college graduation. How they were so preoccupied with making sure Eric didn't feel excluded that they hardly assisted with my wedding. How Eric felt uncomfortable around infants. Thus they had only been to see James twice since he was born. If I couldn't respect my brother, my dad became irate and urged me to leave their home. That's exactly what I did. I told my wife we were going, scooped up my son, and left. Look how upset Eric is now, was the reason my mother broke down in tears, not the fact that I was going. The calls and messages began to come in later that day. I had to apologize to Eric. My parents informed me over the phone. He apparently locked himself in his room and wouldn't go because he was so unhappy about his damaged shirt. Some family members called to let me know that I should have recognized Eric's sensitivity and refrained from provoking him by spilling food on him. According to other texts, I was being dramatic about a little slap and should be more understanding because I'm the older brother. Eric, my parents, and the family members who stood up for him were all blocked by me. Some relatives who were present at the time of the incident expressed their support for me, stating that they had always seen how unfairly I was treated, but that had refrained from speaking out to prevent creating a scene. Too late, too little. Now a month has passed. My wife completely agrees with my decision to cut off communication. She stated that she never wants James to believe that hitting people is acceptable or that he must put up with abuse because it originates from his family. Some family members claim that since Eric is my younger brother, I should forgive him and that I am being too harsh. However, I fail to see why, simply because we are related, I should continue to put up with mistreatment. First update: I haven't communicated with my family in 2 years. The absence of their incessant drama has brought tranquility to life. At 3 years old, James is doing well. In addition, we have a 6-month-old daughter named Emma, in addition to purchasing a larger home and receiving advancements at work. Darla and I have been content with our lives as a family of 4. Everything changed last week when I received a call from an unidentified number. My mother was crying uncontrollably. Her cries made it difficult for me to grasp what she was saying at first. I was shocked by what I heard. When she eventually relaxed enough to talk, Eric was selling their house after somehow getting it transferred into his name. They had been given 2 weeks to vacate by him. There was nowhere for them to go. But the biggest shock wasn't even that. I was stunned to learn that the house had truly always been in my name. Mom says my grandfather left the house to me in his will when he died 15 years ago. I had just started college at the age of 20. Due to their own plans, my parents never disclosed this inheritance to me in an attempt to persuade me to give the house to Eric when he was more stable. They had been waiting for the right time to tell me that they wanted Eric to ultimately own it. They resided in my house for 15 years without claiming it as their own. They allowed Eric to live there for free for 15 years while I worked several jobs to pay for my own place. While they saw me struggle to save for a down payment on my first home, they kept this a secret for 15 years. Mom started sobbing as she talked about how they never imagined Eric would turn on them in this way. He had been behaving oddly for several months, apparently. He had begun discussing moving to a different state to live with some buddies who played online games. They required funds for streaming equipment and a game setup. At that point, he began inquiring about who owned the residence. How Eric was able to get the house registered in his name is still a mystery to me. He took care of the paperwork during their trip last month. According to Mom, who kept saying it, I can only presume he falsified my signature because I never signed any transfer forms. The situation's irony is nearly comical since the house was genuinely mine. The same parents who evicted me from their home 2 years ago, now pleading with me for assistance. The brother who attacked me during my son's birthday celebration has now betrayed them by attempting to take my belongings. Mom talked on the phone for an hour about how they were going to be homeless and that they had nowhere else to go because they had spent all of their savings on Eric over the years, including paying for his failed college attempt, purchasing his gaming gear, paying for his insurance and car payments, and even paying for his convention attendance. She also disclosed that Eric's behavior worsened. I stopped communicating with him. He declared he was going to become a professional gamer and completely quit his job. He played games all day and streamed to his modest internet fan base at night. He would have tantrums, smash things, and threaten to move out when they suggested he look for a job. My father also picked up the phone. He attempted to defend their conduct by claiming that they just had their 2 sons' best interests in mind, that they had intended to ultimately notify me about the bequest, and that they never imagined Eric would act in such a way. He even went so far as to suggest that perhaps none of this would have occurred if I had kept in touch, Without saying anything, I hung up. I received more calls from different family members pleading with me to assist my parents. Some people made an effort to guilt-trip me by bringing up their advanced age and vulnerability. Others said I was being just as evil as Eric by not helping them. Darla believes that since they are still my parents and appear to sincerely regret their situation, we ought to assist them. But I find it difficult to sympathize. For 15 years, they misled me about my own property, while I put a lot of effort into purchasing my own home. They let their golden child reside there for free. When he attacked me in front of my family, they stood up for him. The only reason they contacted me now was to ask for something. To find out how Eric was able to get the house in his name, I got in touch with a lawyer. The attorney attested to the fact that my grandfather's will did in fact leave me the house, because I never signed any transfer forms. She is investigating the documents Eric used to transfer the property and concludes that his claim to the house would not stand up in court. She added that we could file a lawsuit against him for forgery. I'm unsure right now since my parents are still my parents. In spite of everything, I have a part of me that wants to help them. However, I also believe that they deserve this because they deceived me and allowed Eric to continue doing so for so long. Perhaps this is the wake-up call they've been waiting for to realize the true nature of their beloved golden child. First update. Although it wasn't simple, my lawyer assisted me in regaining the residence. Yes, Eric had falsified my signature on a number of documents. Additionally, he falsely claimed to have my power of attorney while lying to other agencies. After nearly 3 months of legal proceedings, Eric has been evicted and the house is once again in my name. I gained additional knowledge regarding what truly transpired during the court processes. For months, Eric had been organizing this. He had discovered my grandfather's will while searching through our parents' old papers. He began looking into ways to transfer property ownership after realizing the house was legally mine. He even used a fictitious name to join some internet communities on real estate fraud. The quality of the fake documents was very high, according to my attorney. Eric ought to have had assistance from a property law expert. Later on, we discovered that he had been using money he borrowed from our parents to pay an internet consultant, claiming the money was for gaming equipment. Eric lost it all. When the police arrived to evict him, he locked himself in his room and wouldn't leave. After hours of haggling, he eventually agreed to go when the door was threatened to be broken. He would not stop yelling that we were all out to destroy his life and that everyone was against him. I was urged by my parents to allow them to remain in the house. After obtaining my location from a family member, they arrived at my house and genuinely collapsed in the driveway. They have nowhere else to go, Mom said, sobbing. Dad was crying, something I had never seen him do before, and he was apologizing for keeping the truth about my inheritance a secret. They acknowledged that they had used up all of their retirement funds on Eric, including loans they had taken out to finance his gaming career, costly gaming settings, car payments, insurance, and the tuition for the 1 semester he attended college. They had genuinely thought that one day he would succeed as a streamer and repay them at last. Dad acknowledged that they had overindulged Eric. He claimed that over the years, they had observed indications of his manipulative behavior, but had consistently made excuses for him. They believed he would eventually mature and become responsible if they provided him with adequate time, resources, and support. Mom disclosed the ways in which Eric had deceived them on the house transfer. He had persuaded them that it was merely a formality to assist him in launching a gaming company. He assured them that after he became a successful streamer, he would look after them forever. They wanted to be sure their baby boy wouldn't turn on them, so they trusted him. Darla and I talked it over, and I agreed to let them stay under certain restrictions. In order to remind them that they are living in my home, they must first pay rent, which is not market rate because they are now on a fixed income. Second, if they wish to have any kind of contact with me or their grandchildren, they must go to family therapy. Third, without my express consent, they are never allowed to let Eric into the house. The eviction was not well received by Eric. He began threatening everyone, including Darla, our parents, and myself. He accused me of turning our parents against him and wrecking his life. Since it was his home, and he had nowhere else to go, he insisted that I allow him to return. I kept all of his threatening messages in case we needed them later, and I banned his number. Eric was couch surfing at his gaming pals' houses when I last heard from him. His ambitious intentions to move in with his online pals apparently fell through when they discovered he was broke. Since he is my brother, other family members advised me to assist him, but I declined. He attempted to use forgeries and fraud to steal my residence. In my opinion, he is no longer my brother. Third update: it has been an interesting 6 months, as agreed upon. My parents have been going to therapy and paying their rent on time. Although it's a gradual process, they are attempting to mend our friendship. There are fresh disclosures every week regarding the various ways in which their partiality harmed both of their boys. At last, Mom acknowledged that they felt bad for allowing Eric. It seems that they were having financial difficulties when Eric was born, so they were unable to provide him with the same luxuries that I enjoyed throughout my early years. They began to overindulge him in order to make up for it. What began as purchasing him additional toys evolved into a lifetime of condoning misbehavior. During one therapy session, Dad lost it when he saw how their behavior made Eric into an entitled monster and drove me away. He acknowledged that they secretly knew I would be all right because I was a responsible and diligent worker. They therefore gave Eric their whole attention because they believed he required greater support to thrive in life. Eric wrote me a long email last month. He asserted that he had also been going to therapy and had come to terms with his errors. He claims that after being evicted, he reached his lowest point. His streaming career never took off, and none of his gaming pals wanted to take him in permanently. He currently shares an apartment with 3 roommates and works at a warehouse. Eric apologized in the email for everything, trying to steal the house, faking my signature, and assaulting James on his birthday. He claimed that treatment enabled him to see how his perspective of the world had been distorted by his parents' partiality. He promised to pay the rent this time and asked if he may live with our parents again. I turned down his request. I sent the email to my attorney, who suggested that I stop communicating with him because of his track record of deceit and deception. Even though I inherited the house, I worked hard to obtain everything else in my life. Even if he says he has changed, I will no longer tolerate his behavior. I continue to face criticism from some family members for charging my elderly parents rent. They claim that I'm being unkind and that families ought to provide unpaid support to one another. However, this is about boundaries and consequences, not money. My parents only expressed regret when they wanted something from me. They allowed my brother to be abused and concealed my inheritance for 15 years. They're fortunate that I'm allowing them to remain at all. Mom still occasionally remarks about Eric's difficulties. She said last week that he might lose his car because he couldn't afford his car payment. I quickly put an end to that by telling her that he is an adult who attempted to defraud me out of my house. If they wish to, they can assist him, but not while residing in my home. Darla says we should ask them to dinner occasionally so they can see their grandchildren, but she believes I'm being fair. Every now and then, James inquires about his grandparents. I'm thinking about it, but I'm not yet prepared for frequent family get-togethers. The treachery is still too recent. This setup works for the time being. I have authority over my property. My parents have a secure place to live, and Eric is at last coming to terms with the repercussions of his behavior. Clear limits and punishments can sometimes improve family relationships. I've discovered that being family does not entail being exploited by others. It entails respecting one another's limits and being accountable to one another. The conclusion: thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.